Today I want to talk about the idea of success and failure in ministry. What makes you a success? What makes you a failure? Now, if we're honest, most small town pastors will compare themselves to megachurch pastors. Maybe by way of, oh, I wish I had a church like them, or oh, well, they just watered down the gospel. That's why their church is so much bigger than mine, or something like that. And I understand really a lot of it's hard. It's a hard thing to get up every day, try your hardest, and to still come up lacking. And I just want to say a few ideas about that. First off, remember that the failure that you feel is more false expectations and ideas in your own head. We get this idea that we're going to change the world, that we're going to single-handedly right all the wrongs, that we're going to do great things, that we're going to, and I mean that's true. But I think sometimes our definition of what doing something great is a little bit off, a little bit wonky, and so we kind of get these ideas of what's going to happen in ministry. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to go and we're going to tell the truth and people are just going to be changed or something. Or we just think, oh, nobody's ever going to listen to me. And then, we kind of just get in a place of apathy and bitterness. But hopefully we don't get there. So let's talk about this real quick. First off, there's going to be times in ministry and in life too, not just in ministry. This isn't a Christian problem so much as a life problem, a living problem. There's going to be times when your best just isn't good enough. You're going to give it your best. You're going to go above and beyond. I'll give you a good example. I started a young adult group when I was younger, and the idea was that I would answer every single problem that came up. I would for instance, if somebody brought up a contradiction in the Bible, or if somebody, brought up a question with the faith, that this would be a place where I could answer those hard questions. And I just had this expectation that as I answered these questions that, well, people would just come to God. And that's not really what happened. It's not that it wasn't a noble goal, and maybe my attitude wasn't perfect all the time, but I mean, I think overall I had a pretty good attitude about it. But I want you to get this: giving the answer, it wasn't enough. Having all the right answers, it wasn't enough. I thought that if I, went onto YouTube comment sections, for instance, here's another, just a more of an online example, and if I argued, and I could prove my points and stuff, and it didn't work like that. Another example, sometimes when you do the right thing, it still just won't be good enough. It won't be enough for somebody. You're going to say things that makes people mad, and don't try to make people mad, but at the end of the day, no matter what you do, it's not going to be enough. There are going to be some people who just don't have your back. And sometimes, this is a hard lesson, but you have to remember to have a very small circle. Now, what do I mean by a small circle? I mean people who know the real you and who you can trust, and not everybody belongs in there. Now, you might say, well, that doesn't sound very Christian. Well, take it however you want it. Yeah. What's going to happen is those people are hopefully going to be able to talk to you openly and frankly, and when you do something and when you're wrong, they should hopefully be able to talk to you about it. But then there's going to be people who aren't in that circle that want to try and tell you how to live your life, or how you're wrong and how this, and they're going to want to criticize you for everything. They want you to live your life how they want you to live. And you can't allow yourself to be distracted by that, because you can take it to that circle, but don't let everybody have that place. Oh, you're such a screw up. Oh, why should you listen to that person? Are they part of your circle? Have they earned a place? Have they earned a trust? And sometimes we allow people into that inner circle and we give trust out of hand. It's going to happen. But there's really not much you can do except for, well, I guess that's a learning experience there. You can't close yourself off from the world, and you can't, go be alone in your principles. You need people who pour life into you. You need to train up other people. You need people who come alongside you and work with you. There's a lot of things in life that are good with that, but don't get distracted by the complainers, because they're always going to be there. And Like I say, sometimes your best is just not going to be good enough. No matter what you do, no matter what you say, it just is not going to be good enough. It's not going to resolve the issue. It's like, oh well, I gave the perfect answer, so this atheist is going to come to Christ. Well, maybe. Well, I acted perfectly, so people won't betray me. I've earned the loyalty of the church or whatever. No. See, the thing about betrayal is it's oftentimes not seen. And there's going to be some times when you say something and you don't mean to, but you hurt somebody's feelings. And when that happens, try to make peace if you can. But you're going to notice that there's some people who just don't want to make peace. They don't want to mend the situation. They would rather just cut you out. And it's hard to realize that you're so disposable that if there's some people you just don't really matter, and that is hard. But once again, you can't get focused on that. You can't allow it to be an all-consuming kind of thing. There's just a lot of depression among people in ministry. You live your life for others. You think that matters. You try to do what's right. You try to say what's right. You try to be right. You try to do what's right, and it just isn't good enough. And that's hard enough. That's very hard. And you're going to come to situations in life and in ministry when there just is no right answer. There's no winning. It's just going to be a cluster cuss. No matter what you do, it's going to be wrong. I'll give you a good example. Was 2020. As ministers, you try to do what's right, but at the end of the day, everything you did was wrong. You do home visits, you don't do home visits. You stop church, you keep doing church. It doesn't matter. Whatever we did, it was wrong. And it's like, well, what are you gonna do? And there's been a lot of times when I've kind of come to the part of asking, did I cause more damage than good? I've been in the ministry for 15 years, and oftentimes it feels like that I've caused more harm than the good that I've done, that I haven't done as much good as harm. And after 15 years, I look over my years of ministry and I think, I have nothing to show for this. You get up every day, you stay faithful, and out of the people who I ministered to, not a single one of them are the same people in 15 years. You think that there's going to be some kind of longevity, that there's going to be some kind of carryover, but it's just not. It's not like that, and you have to be okay with being a protector when people don't want to be protected. You know what I mean? You have to be okay with loving people who haven't figured out what it means to be a Christian. And it's hard, and a lot of times ministers just get bitter about it because it's like, well, nothing I can do, and everybody's just going to stab me in the back and everybody's going to leave me. Well, maybe that we have no guarantee that that's going to happen. So what do you do with that when you feel like, okay, well, I have nothing to show for all my years of ministry? What do you do with that? Well, it comes down to two basic questions, and this is the basis of whether you are successful or a failure. Did you obey? Not were you perfect. Not were you perfect. Not did you always handle everything right. Not no, none of that. None of those things. Just, did you obey God? When He told you to go, did you go? Did you do your best? Did you really commit your heart to it? Did you obey? Just a real quick, real easy question. And the second question, did you love well? When people betrayed you, when people talked about you, when people weren't there for you, when you had to do it all by yourself, and when it seemed like everything was falling apart, and you were the one who were lifting people up, even though nobody else was, when you stuck with it, did you love well, or did you try and win arguments? Did you try and get your way? Was it more about being right than it was seeing God bring people to Him? And that is that is a hard thing because we want to justify ourselves. We want to be right. We want to win. We want to have something to show for it. But sometimes there is nothing to show for it. It's just a hard job that God called you to. But it comes down to those two questions, because if you can answer yes to both of those questions with a clear conscience, that makes you a success in ministry. Sometimes the perfect person is in the right place and it just, church growth happens. Sometimes you're in the right place, you're the right person for the job, and growth doesn't happen. It's not something that you can really anticipate. And some people have made a habit of going from church to church, trying to, this is going to be the one that I turn into mega church. And they never do. And so then they think, well, I'm a failure. Well, that's not quite a fair analysis. Sometimes we live in small communities. Sometimes there's too many churches for the community as it is. Sometimes there's just a lot of history. A lot of history to that community that you live in. And, sometimes it's just poor strategy. Sometimes there's no strategy. And then sometimes it's just God's gonna, for whatever reason, only bring a few people by. I don't know why that happens, but if you read in the Bible, it seems like there were a lot of times when Paul went to a city or whatever, and there was a relatively small congregation there. Just a couple of people, really. And see, what we do is we read in the book of Acts, and we read in Jerusalem how 5,000 were saved in one day. Okay, all right. But that doesn't mean that in every single town in the whole known world that there were all kinds of Christians everywhere. Christianity was spreading, yeah, absolutely. But some cities had a very small church. Very small. And it's not so much about numbers that makes you a success. It's not so much about financial income that makes you a success. It's not so much about having all the answers and doing everything right that makes you a success. Because like I said, it's not going to be enough. Your best isn't going to be good enough. There's going to be situations that you can't win. But did you obey and did you love? That's really what it comes down to. So with all those things said, remember that there's more to life than ministry. I know being a minister, it's hard to remember that, but it's true. Some good examples: be a good husband, be a good father. Your ministry should not come before your family. And I know that it's impossible to spend as much time with your family as it is with ministry, but that doesn't mean that you don't even have to try. Maybe set times when you say, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to go home now. And when people say, well, we need you, well, you're just going to have to wait for tomorrow because my kids need me and my wife needs me and they haven't even seen me today. When you're working 12 or 13 hours a day without any days off, it's time to reevaluate and say, what? I need new priorities. There's something that ministers oftentimes do, and that's that we put our ministry above God. And we think, well, how? Ministry is my relationship with God. And it's like, well, no, it's not. Here's your relationship with God. Seek Him, pray, read the Bible. And then there's be a husband, be a father. And then there's pastor the church. And it has to be that. Because there will always be more demands. There's always be more things to do. Really, there will. There'll always be, do this. People who are not happy, people who are causing problems. It's just one thing after another. It's always going to be there. It's best that you learn how to prioritize and not spend all of your time on people who cannot be satisfied. There's people out there who actually do need you to be their pastor, that they want to grow. When somebody's not in a place where they want to grow, there's nothing you can do about that. You have to just take a step back and say, okay, all right, I tried everything that I could. There's nothing I can do in this situation at this time. This person is unteachable. They're unpastorable. And that's okay. You don't have to win everything. You don't have to win them all. It's up to that person, what they decide to choose to do. It's up to you to do what God has called you to do, but that doesn't mean that you get to have control over what they do with their decisions. It's still their decision that they have to choose. And that's hard, but that's the way it is. So remember, if you are rejected and hated, you keep doing what God called you to do. And it's gonna happen. Ministry, you can't hide from conflict, but you can't hide from conflict out of ministry either. It's just a part of life. You don't have to like it, but it definitely is. Once again, the way it is. So, how do you know if you're a success or a failure in ministry? Well, if you obeyed and if you loved. Did you serve? That's you could summarize both those questions up. Did you obey God and did you love people well? With did you serve? And that's what it comes down to, because you are going to make mistakes, and even if you didn't make mistakes, it still won't be good enough. So don't look to your perfection in ministry, but rather trust God through the situation and trust Him to carry you. And remember to take breaks and to take a step back and reevaluate. And I hope that this helps. Remember to get help if you find yourself in a place of just hopelessness.